Do you ever stop and think to yourself, how did I get in this situation? Because somehow these are the parts that I have with me right now. And this is where I was 2 or so days ago. This is not all the way disassembled. As you can see here, this body slides up and down with a spring buried behind it. Currently, it is held in place only by the force of that gasket. Unfortunately, as far as I could find, Honda does not sell this gasket individually, and as such, I do not wish to damage it by removing this needlessly. If you are curious about disassembly, unfortunately, I do not have footage of that part. However, most of these steps can be repeated in reverse pretty simply. What you see here are the visible components of the gas tank. As my bike is a 2003, they have become visibly corroded and I opted to remove them to be painted. As far as how well they will hold up with paint instead of powder coat like I originally intended, well, we'll just kind of have to wait and see for that. You can see this pivot here is held in place by a cotter pin that is fully retained on one side. As none of the parts that this rubs against are visible, I opted to not remove that pin and simply paint with this as one whole assembly, although it could, in theory, be disassembled further. As you can see, this is retained by a pin that once the gas cap has been lifted and pushed out, can be inserted from the side and then drop back into that channel and held flush. The next stage of reassembly will include this flat spring as well as these 2 small screws. With those 2 screws reinstalled, you can see that our lift cap is fully retained and should lock back down into place. The last step here is the installation of a small ringed washer around the key slot right there. With that set aside, we can now bring in the rest of our components. This here is your lock cylinder. When the key is inserted, all of those wafers above are pulled down to lay completely flat. It is important to note, however, that these wafers are not positively retained once removed. They must fall back into the correct slots. If yours do become completely dislodged, you can simply swap them around until once the key is inserted, it is completely flush as there. These are the 2 actual lock lugs that engage with the bottom of your tank. They are matched to each other, and when inserted, that cut angle there must face downwards into your gas tank. To install them, we will take this spring, insert it into one of the locks, and start to slide it into the body. At this point, this center ring must be depressed to allow one to slide fully into position. From there, the other side can be inserted using a finger to hold this one in place as well, as they will attempt to leave under spring pressure. Once assembled like that though, if this ring is pushed down, both of these will shoot out. You push, and we lost one. Once both of these lugs have been fully inserted until retained by spring force here, we will take our key cylinder and insert it onto our key. We will then turn our key 90 degrees from those top and bottom cuts and insert it fully. Then, pushing up on this ring here, We can rotate our key and remove it. This is now assembled in the locked tank position. We can now begin reassembly, starting with this gasket here, lining it up and pressing gently into place. With our two sub-assemblies complete, we will now take it, rotate into place, and it should rest in that detent. What you'll notice now is that there are 3 screw holes. By pulling back this gasket, we can reveal one of them to be there. The second in that position there. And a matching third right there. One thing to note is that from all of my searching, this gasket here appears to be one piece with this body. I was not able to remove it non-destructively. I was unable to find them available for sale. You will now get to watch me struggle as I attempt to stand behind a camera, hold this gasket open with one hand, and using a magnetic screwdriver, insert these screws into those 3 positions. Now that that process is done, you might hopefully think we're finished, but we're not. There is still one more feature, which is this metal retaining ring that will slip down over this assembly, rotate into place, and lock down underneath this gasket right here. Before you do that, however, it is important to note that this gasket must be flat. During removal, mine became slightly bent, so I'm going to take it over to the bench vise, give it a squeeze, and we'll be right back. We can now begin the process of prying this rubber ring around that steel retainer. It is much easier if you have a handful of small picks, or more importantly, 3 hands. About 45 minutes later, we now have a gas cap, in this instance for a Honda VFR800, but based off of schematics should fit some other Honda motorcycles of this era. That is locked at this time. We're able to insert our key, and while pressing on this plunger here that would simulate your tank, rotate and unlock our tank. Again, pushing down on this triangle, we can then fully remove our key. This fuel filler cap is now ready to be reinstalled back on the motorcycle.